Ferrari Purosangue has landed in Australia complete with its chest-thumping V12 engine and an eye-watering price tag to match. It is a raised Ferrari with 4 passenger doors for the first time and a 4-seat layout. However, the Italian car maker insists this isn't an SUV, but let's call a spade a spade. That's what well-heeled families are going to be using it for. So today, we're putting the Purosangue to the ultimate test. The family test. Now granted, this drive isn't all about ISOFIX attachment points or ground clearance, but given the Purosangue breaks new ground for Ferrari on those fronts, it makes sense to test it accordingly, especially since we've already established the Purosangue is something of a rocket on road in earlier overseas tests. Ferrari's first high rider lands in Australia subject to a 3-year waitlist and goes up against established players including the Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT, Lamborghini Urus Performante and the Aston Martin DBX 707. Clearly, this SUV means business. Now, unlike many of those rivals, the Purosangue doesn't share its architecture with any other vehicle. It rides on a unique, largely aluminium monocoque. Also very special in this segment is the engine. Take a look at it, a 6.5 litre naturally aspirated V12, which is becoming rarer and rarer as emission standards become tighter, a 0 to 100 time of 3.3 seconds, and a top speed of 310 kilometers an hour, which is also uncharted territory for this segment. The engine is matched to a transaxle gearbox on the rear axle. It's an 8-speed twin clutch unit. So you've got a nice weight distribution, 49% on the front, 51% on the rear. Also unique to this segment is the price of the Purosangue, $728,000 before on-road costs. The Purosangue offers generous after-sales provisions such as 7 years complimentary servicing, which kind of defies expectations for a high-riding European supercar. However, the same can't be said for some of the interior shortfalls. The inside of the Purosangue feels like a very clever execution of a Ferrari interior. There's lots of great design, lots of symmetry around the cabin too. Even you'll notice the center screen and the passenger screen, the vents and everything are all sort of like a mirror of one another, which is really pretty to look at. Storage is quite good, definitely not segment leading, but there's great cubbies kind of hidden around the cabin, big door pockets, you've got cup holders and everything else, and above all else, loads of space. If you're buying a Purosangue because you want the higher ride height, it definitely has that, but the seats themselves are still quite low set, so you don't feel like you're stepping up into the car, but it's certainly not like you're getting into a 296 either. It's a lot comfortable to get in and out of the car. The great thing about that low set driving position is that it really does cultivate great feeling and feedback with the car, which we'll get to in the driving section. But vision is great front and rear. Everything in here feels comfortable. There's your typical requisite carbon fiber splashed around the cabin as well, and it feels practical above all else. With all of that said, the Purosangue feels nicely put together inside with excellent service treatments and consistent panel gaps upon closer inspection. Now that brings us to some of the finer details of the Purosangue interior, its infotainment. I will say in a word, it's very Italian. There are some good bits like the Maranello dial, that's still correct and present like all Ferraris from the past few decades. But there are other things that have been introduced which I'm kind of less taken with. We'll start with the HVAC control. So a lot of 2-stage processes here. You can't just press a button or a bit of switchgear to activate things. If you want to adjust the air temperature or the fan speed, you first got to pull this dial out and then you change it on the road. You've got heated seats, you've got heated steering wheel as well, but some of the functions, they're just not as easy to access as they should be. And I think the focus here should be on streamlining the process. You don't want to worry about this stuff when you're driving a Ferrari, but that's what I've found on the road and in traffic. You're in a really expensive car. You don't want to be taking your eyes away from what's happening in front of you. And this system tends to do that. As an extension of that, the infotainment. It's just clunky and hard to use. Everything is operated via this digital instrument cluster and it's not touchscreen sensitive. So you've got to use this crazy little haptic pad that doesn't always work and you've got to wake it up, and the touches you have to be so delicate with. again, you'll be driving along and you'll cover 100 meters in the time that it takes to change songs on Apple CarPlay. You do have some physical buttons and dials behind the wheel here, but again, it's really basic things just like this that probably should be better. The Purosangue covers 6 of our 8 infotainment requisites as standard. With respect to safety, it ticks every box as standard, together with 10 airbags and multiple outward cameras. That brings us to rear seat space, and one of the big party tricks of the Purosangue, it's rear opening doors. Check this out. They're rear hinged, so they basically act like a suicide door, and what that does is enable a lot more ingress and egress space, and that is space to get in and out of the car. Not too bad at all. Now, credit where credit is due here. There is genuinely enough room in the back of the Purosangue for a couple of full-size adults. A lot of that is on account of its wheelbase, 3,018 millimeters, so it has liberated a lot of space in the first and second rows. You'll see here, this seat, you do have to push it a little bit forward to have a rear-facing child seat, but for adults, there's plenty of space. You will notice that there's 2 seats in the back instead of 3. That's dictated by the installation of the transaxle gearbox. It has taken up a lot of the real estate above the transmission tunnel. So for that reason, you've just got this nice neat console. There's cup holders. You've got all of your window switch gear there as well, and controls for both the power outlets and the rear air vents. But everything is nice here. A lot of the contact points are adorned in leather. There's plenty of knee room, plenty of shoulder room, a slight limitation on headroom, and also the window line, which is just a virtue of that raked roofline. Now, this is where the Purosangue begins to lose a little bit of its shine as an SUV. It sounds ridiculous to criticise a Ferrari for boot space, but take a look, there's not a lot of room there. 473 litres. It means you'll fit a duffel bag or a full-size suitcase, but we've tried to put the full-size 2-piece designer pram in there and it just didn't fit. You have got electrically adjustable second row seats, which you can stow. You're able to also remove this back parcel shelf here and the top one. So at its stretch, you'll be able to fit the golf clubs. But I guess given the intended purpose of this car, there's not a lot of day-to-day amenity there. It's also missing a spare tyre of any kind. So then, that's the SUV side of things sorted, but of equal or greater importance is the way the Purosangue drives. And in short, it doesn't disappoint. So all of that family-friendly stuff aside, the biggest compliment that you could give the Ferrari Purosangue is that it looks, feels and drives like a proper Ferrari, and that will be music to the ears of enthusiasts out there. I'm really astonished at just how capable it is, given the high riding stature, given the 2-ton curb weight, and given the length of this thing as well. It's not a small car, but it does magic things on the road. So we'll get to the comfort stuff in a moment, but I want to sort of premise all of this by talking about just the performance here. The talking point has to be the V12 engine. I mean, what else can give you the crescendo that a naturally aspirated V12 gives you? It is just magic, and it is a point of difference, increasingly so in a shrinking V12 marketplace. I'll be honest, it doesn't quite have the oral crescendo that I was looking for. This is a little bit more muted, and I know that that's deliberate because Ferrari has tuned this engine a little bit differently so that it is more family friendly, so that it is more civilized as well. So that is, I guess, in keeping with the SUV thing, but if you're buying a Ferrari, you kind of want it to scream from the rooftops. This does that, but it doesn't quite have that signature shrieking V12 soundtrack to match. But otherwise, there is very little to complain about from the engine department. It produces all of that torque really low on the rev range. It's got a beautiful mid-range. And as I said before, from 5,000, 6,000 RPM onwards, this engine really finds its straps. The peak power output is just before that rev ceiling. So you know that it's more than happy to explore the upper reaches of the dial. And that is when you're getting all the emotion and frankly, all of the speed. There's not many opportunities on public roads where you're really able to exploit the power, pace and grace of the new Purosangue, but I'll try my best. Handling wise, it is an absolute beaut. I'm really shocked at just how finessed and just how balanced this car is on a twisting bit of country road. We're covering some really rugged Southern Highlands roads, so coarse chip bitumen, potholes, lots of undulations, square edges and all the rest. And this suspension is doing a magnificent job of soaking those bumps up, but also ensuring the car is controlled at all times. Tip into a corner. I'm in the harshest setting at the moment. And look at that, barely any body roll. The body roll that it does have allows the car to kind of move the weight to its outside haunches and just squirrel down and go for it. It just works so well. So much happening on the road underneath me, and yet inside the cabin is a picture of grace and opulence. It works so incredibly well. The steering for mine isn't nearly as quick as a lot of other V12 front engine Ferraris. Again, that's deliberate, that's the way they've tuned it. But it means it doesn't feel nervous in any way. It's not nearly as quick or nervous off center as something like the 812 Superfast. It's a 14:1 steering rack and only 2 turns lock to lock. So it does speed up through the rack as you add a little bit more steering input. But it's very nice, very linear, very predictable on everyday roads. And of course, when you want a little bit more reaction, it will do that too. This car is fitted with rear wheel steering, so no problems with the 2 turns lock to lock in terms of your everyday amenity and turning circle and all of that. It's certainly manageable there. But wow, what a thing. I think Ferrari has every right to say this isn't an SUV, because this doesn't feel like an SUV dynamically. It feels much, much sharper. All right, that is the pure Ferrari side. What about the family side? I'll switch to automatic mode with the gearbox and the softer comfort damper setting. And look at that. All of that talk around acoustics, quietness really comes to the fore now. As I said, we're on pretty rough, rugged country roads, and he's doing a terrific job of isolating myself from what's happening underneath. You can easily hold a conversation with your front and rear occupants. The steering, again, not being so nervous off center. It's very easy to place this car in its lane. It's very easy to navigate corners. You're not making sort of second nibbles at steering input. You're able to do everything in one clean, concise sort of move. In terms of the V12 and its day-to-day amenity, it will naturally push for higher gears when it can in terms of efficiency. Yes, it's not going to be the most efficient drivetrain out there, but on longer runs, the trip meter has displayed range of up to 500 kilometers, but this is just a picture. You could definitely see yourself ferrying the family around on a trip away on the weekend in real ease and comfort. Everything here I can live with. The vision, the acoustics, the ride quality, it is the complete package. You do have to go through some compromise, obviously, the boot, the price tag, the fuel consumption, but as a family car, as a family Ferrari, well, this definitely works. Well, it's very easy to be cynical of the performance SUV, even more so one wearing the prancing horse badge. And there's a lot of criticisms that you can level at the Purosangue. It doesn't tow anything, it won't carry much in the boot, and the infotainment, well, it's a long way short of perfect. But with all of that said, I have to admit I reckon it passes the family test. It will ferry 4 people round in comfort. It does have the high riding stature, and importantly, probably most importantly, it looks, feels and drives like a Ferrari. There is some compromise with this car, but that's commonplace in the supercar segment, and let's be honest, this is a supercar in every sense of the word.